You can't cage a free spirit, she said, calling marriage a social construct designed to trap women. So I gave her the freedom she wanted. Turns out, independence isn't so fun when no one pays the bills. So my girlfriend Allison and I have been together for 2.5 years, living together for the past 18 months. Our lease is up next month and I told her I'm not renewing it. She's been spiraling ever since and I don't know if I'm the asshole here or if this is just reality hitting her. Allison has always been super vocal about not wanting traditional relationship bullshit. She calls marriage a social construct designed to trap women and says commitment is just another word for cage. Cool, whatever works for her. I never pushed marriage or anything serious because honestly I was fine with keeping things casual too. She's fun and we have good chemistry, but here's where it gets weird. Despite all her talk about freedom and independence, Allison has never really taken care of herself. Like, she works part-time at a yoga studio, maybe 15 hours a week, and does some Instagram wellness coaching thing. When we moved in together, I was paying probably 80% of everything. She said it was temporary until her business took off, but that was 18 months ago. A few months back, I started thinking about the future. I'm 29, have a good job in tech, and I want to buy a house, maybe start building something real. I brought up the idea of us getting more serious, not necessarily marriage right away, but at least talking about long-term goals, maybe her contributing more financially so we could save together. That's when she lost it. Here's basically how that conversation went her. Oh my God, here we go. You're trying to change me into some suburban housewife stereotype. Me? I'm not trying to change you. I'm asking if you want to build something together. Her. Build what? A cage. Because that's what this is. You want to trap me in some boring, soul-crushing life just because you're getting old and desperate. Me? Desperate. I'm talking about basic partnership, her. No, you're talking about control. I need to follow my spiritual path, and I can't be contained by societal expectations about what relationships should look like. Me? Okay, but even spiritual people have to pay rent, her. There it is. You're trying to drag me down to your level, make everything about money when love should be enough. You can't cage a free spirit, and that's exactly what you're trying to do. The word cage came up like 6 more times in that conversation. Apparently wanting your girlfriend to contribute financially is the same as imprisoning her. Fine. I heard her loud and clear. If commitment is a cage and she doesn't want to build anything together, then we shouldn't be living together like we're building something together, right? Makes perfect sense to me. So when our landlord asked about renewing the lease, I told him no. I found a smaller place for just me. Gave Allison 2 months' notice, which is more than the lease requires, and told her she'll need to figure out her own living situation since she values her independence so much. You'd think someone who calls commitment a cage would be thrilled about this, right? Wrong. She's been having complete meltdowns for 3 weeks now. Crying, yelling, asking how I could abandon her like this. Keeps saying she thought we were building something beautiful together. The same woman who told me she wouldn't be caged by my expectations literally 6 weeks ago. The cognitive dissonance is insane. She wants all the benefits of a committed relationship, but none of the actual commitment part. Yesterday she asked if we could just stay roommates and split the rent 50-50 on a new place. I asked her how she'd pay her half since she makes about $400 a month total. She said she'd figure it out, and I was being financially controlling by bringing up math. Apparently basic arithmetic is now a form of abuse. I'm moving out in 2 weeks. She keeps alternating between calling me heartless and begging me to reconsider. Her latest strategy is telling everyone that I'm kicking her out and making me look like the bad guy. This whole thing has me questioning everything. Like, did I miss something? Is there a way to have a relationship with someone who wants all the benefits but none of the responsibility? Because right now it feels like she just wanted a dad, not a boyfriend. Edit. A few people are asking about her family. Her parents are pretty well off, but they've been pushing her to get serious about life for years. She's been avoiding them lately because they keep asking when she's going to get a real job. I think part of why she moved in with me was to avoid moving back home. For everyone asking why I stayed this long, honestly, it was comfortable. She's fun when she's not being dramatic, and I guess I thought she'd eventually grow up. Classic mistake, I know. Update 1. Posted 2 weeks ago first, thanks to everyone who responded to my original post. Reading all your comments made me realize I wasn't crazy. So here's what happened after my last post. I thought giving her 2 months' notice was generous, but apparently Allison had convinced herself I was bluffing. She kept acting like nothing was changing, even started talking about our plans for next month like we weren't splitting up. When I started packing boxes last weekend, reality finally hit her. That's when the real manipulation began. Suddenly, she was the perfect girlfriend. Made me breakfast every morning, wanted to have deep conversations about our relationship, kept telling me how much she loved me and couldn't live without me. She even cleaned the apartment, which was shocking since getting her to do dishes was usually like pulling teeth. She kept saying things like, "I know I haven't been the best partner, but I'm ready to change. And I realize now that I was scared of how much I love you." For about 2 days, I almost bought it. She seemed genuinely remorseful and like maybe she was finally ready to be an adult. But then I found out she'd applied for exactly 0 apartments or figure out her living situation. When I asked about it, she said she was focusing on fixing us first because that was more important than logistics. Translation: she was hoping the love bombing would work and she wouldn't have to actually deal with reality. When the girlfriend act didn't work, she pivoted to her spiritual bullshit. Suddenly, our relationship was divinely guided, and breaking up would be going against the universe's plan for us. She started leaving crystals around the apartment and burning sage constantly. She told me she'd had a vision during meditation that we were twin flames, meant to help each other grow, and that my wanting to leave was just my ego resisting spiritual evolution. The best part was when she told me that her tarot cards said we were supposed to stay together and work through this. I asked if the cards mentioned anything about her getting a job, and she said I was mocking her spiritual practice and being energetically violent. When the spiritual angle failed, she went nuclear on social media, posted this long Instagram story about how toxic masculinity was destroying our relationship and how I was trying to control her divine feminine energy. Made it sound like I was some abusive monster demanding she become a tradwife, instead of just asking her to pay her own rent. Her wellness coach friends all started commenting support, telling her she was too pure for this world, and that I obviously couldn't handle a woman who knew her worth. None of them mentioned that knowing your worth typically involves being able to pay for your own food. This is where it got really ugly. She called my mom crying, telling her I was abandoning her and asking my family to intervene. She made it sound like we were basically married and I was just randomly kicking her out for no reason. My mom called me confused as hell, asking what was going on. When I explained the situation, there was this long pause before she said, "So, she doesn't want to commit to you, but she wants you to commit to supporting her indefinitely." Did I understand that right? Allison also reached out to my sister on Facebook, asking her to talk sense into me, because I was throwing away something beautiful over money. My sister sent me screenshots of the conversation. Allison basically admitted she couldn't afford to live without me but claimed that was irrelevant because love should be enough. The final straw came 3 days ago. I was at work and came home to find she'd invited 2 of her friends over to stage what I can only describe as an intervention. They'd prepared a whole presentation about how I was manifesting scarcity mindset and choosing fear over love. One of them literally suggested that I was intimidated by Allison's spiritual power, and that's why I wanted to control her with financial expectations. The other one told me that evolved men don't care about money and that my focus on bills and rent was very third-dimensional thinking. I listened to this bullshit for about 10 minutes before I asked them all to leave. Allison started crying, saying I was being cruel and closed-minded, and that I was rejecting not just her but her entire community. That's when it clicked for me. This isn't about commitment or freedom or spiritual evolution. She's built this whole identity around being a free spirit who's above mundane concerns like rent and groceries. But the only way that identity works is if someone else, me, handles all the mundane shit for her. She doesn't want a partner. She wants a patron. Someone to fund her lifestyle while she plays enlightened guru on Instagram. And when I stopped being willing to play that role, suddenly I became the villain in her story. I'm moving out this weekend. She's been alternating between begging and raging for the past 3 days. Yesterday she told me she never really loved me anyway and was just settling because I was safe and boring. Today she's back to crying and asking how I can destroy what we built together. The thing is, we didn't build anything together. I built a life that happened to include her, while she built an Instagram brand that happened to include me as an unpaid sponsor. I'm done setting myself on fire to keep someone warm who won't even acknowledge that fire is hot. Edit. A bunch of people are asking what she's going to do for housing. As of today, she still hasn't applied for any apartments or reached out to potential roommates. She keeps insisting this is all going to work out because the universe will provide. I guess we'll see how that goes. Update 2. Posted 1 week ago. Jesus Christ, you guys. This week has been absolutely unhinged. I thought I'd seen the worst of Allison's manipulation tactics, but apparently she was just getting warmed up. I'm writing this from my new apartment because I moved out yesterday. So picking up from where I left off, I'd given Allison multiple reality checks. She tried every manipulation tactic in the book, and she still hadn't made any concrete plans for after I moved out. With 1 week left on our lease, I figured she'd finally start taking action. I was wrong. Last Monday, Allison pulled what I can only describe as her nuclear option. She called her parents. Now I'd only met them a few times and they always seemed nice but concerned about her lack of direction. Turns out, she'd been telling them our entire relationship that I was supporting her dreams and we were building something together. Her dad called me Tuesday morning. He was polite but clearly confused, asking if there was anything he could do to help us work things out. I explained the situation as diplomatically as possible, that Allison and I wanted different things. She valued her independence, and I respected that enough to give her complete freedom to pursue her own path. There was this long pause before he said, "Independence. Is that what she's calling it?" Then he told me that they'd been supporting her financially for years before she moved in with me, and they'd assumed that arrangement had ended because she'd finally found stability with me. Turns out, her parents had been sending her $500 a month this entire time, which she'd never mentioned. So she was getting money from them and having me pay for everything. When I mentioned this to her later, she said it wasn't really income because it was family money, and besides, she deserved support while building her spiritual business. By Wednesday, Allison had mobilized her entire wellness coach network. I started getting messages from random Instagram accounts telling me I was making a huge mistake and that Allison was one of the most pure souls they'd ever met. A few of them offered to educate me about spiritual partnerships and how evolved relationships work. One woman sent me a 20-minute voice message explaining how my attachment to material security was blocking my heart chakra and preventing me from experiencing true love. The funniest part was when one of her spiritual mentors offered to do a healing session for our relationship. For only $200, she could clear the energetic blocks that were causing our problems. I declined, which apparently made me resistant to growth and healing. Allison was eating this up, posting constantly about how her soul tribe was supporting her through this spiritual attack from someone who couldn't match her vibration. She was positioning herself as some kind of martyr, being persecuted for her enlightenment. Thursday was when everything fell apart. I was packing my last boxes when Allison's phone rang. It was her landlord from before we moved in together. Apparently, she'd never paid the final month's rent when she moved out to live with me, and it had been sent to collections. He was calling because the collection agency had finally tracked her down. She owed $1,400 plus fees, and they were threatening to sue. She'd been hiding this debt for over a year, letting it pile up while I paid for everything, and she spent her parents' money on crystals and wellness courses. When she hung up, I asked her about it. That's when she completely lost it. Started screaming about how unfair it was that she had to worry about low vibrational things like debt when she was trying to raise the consciousness of humanity. Said it wasn't her fault that society was built around money instead of love. I pointed out that debt is what happens when you take things without paying for them, and that had nothing to do with consciousness or vibration. She threw a freaking crystal at me, a rose quartz, which would be ironic if it wasn't so insane. Friday was my last day in the apartment, and Allison pulled out her final card. She claimed to be pregnant. Said she just found out and we needed to table everything until we figured out what to do about the baby. I asked to see the test. She said she'd thrown it away because she was in shock. I offered to go buy another test so we could confirm. She said that would be traumatic for her and I was being insensitive to her emotional state. Here's the thing, we haven't slept with each other in 3 weeks, not since this whole drama started. When I pointed that out, she said it must have happened before then and she was just now showing symptoms. I told her I'd be happy to support her through a pregnancy, but we should probably confirm it with a doctor before making any major decisions. She started crying and saying I didn't believe her and that my lack of trust was destroying our relationship. By Saturday morning, she dropped the pregnancy thing entirely and was back to begging me not to leave. Yesterday was the actual move. I hired movers and got my stuff out while Allison sat on the couch crying and live-streaming herself on Instagram, talking about how she was experiencing a spiritual death and rebirth as I loaded boxes into the truck. Her followers were eating it up, sending hearts and supportive comments about how she was releasing what no longer served her and making space for her true soulmate. The cognitive dissonance was incredible. She was simultaneously devastated that I was leaving and pretending it was her choice to let me go. When the movers left with my furniture, the apartment looked completely different. Turns out, almost everything had been mine. The couch, the TV, the dining table, most of the kitchen stuff, even the decent bed. She was left with basically a yoga mat, some pillows on the floor, and about 50 crystals. That's when reality really hit her. She called her parents crying, and I could hear her dad on speakerphone asking where she was planning to live. She kept saying she didn't know, and he was getting more frustrated, asking why she hadn't figured this out weeks ago. The call ended with him telling her she could come home, but she'd have to follow their rules, no more spiritual business, time to get a real job and start acting like an adult. She hung up on him. As I was doing my final walkthrough, she suddenly grabbed my arm. "Wait, please, don't do this," she said, tears streaming down her face. "I'll do anything. I'll get a real job, I'll pay half the rent. We can even talk about marriage if that's what you want." I gently pulled my arm free. "Allison, I don't want someone who needs the threat of homelessness to finally consider contributing to a relationship. Partnership should be something you want, not something you'd only do to avoid consequences." Her face crumpled. "You're heartless. You're abandoning me in my darkest hour when I need you most." I looked at her sitting there surrounded by crystals and yoga props, the same setup she'd used to justify not working for 2 years. "Remember 3 months ago when you told me commitment was a cage, that you wouldn't let me trap you in some boring life? You said you needed to follow your spiritual path and couldn't be contained by expectations." She stared at me, mascara running down her cheeks. "I'm not abandoning you," I continued. "I'm giving you exactly what you asked for, complete freedom from any cages or expectations. You should be happy." "That's not, I didn't mean," she stammered. "You did mean it, and that's okay. We just want different things." I told her to call if she had a real emergency, but otherwise we were done. She was still crying on her yoga mat surrounded by crystals when I closed the door for the last time. I'm writing this from my new place. It's smaller and costs more than half of what I was paying for our old place, but it's mine. I feel this incredible sense of relief, like I've been holding my breath for months and can finally exhale. Edit. For everyone asking what happened to her, as far as I know, she moved back in with her parents yesterday. Her Instagram has been radio silent since then, which is the longest she's gone without posting in the entire time I've known her. Final update, posted 3 days ago. Hey Reddit. I know a lot of you have been asking for updates, so here's what I hope will be the final chapter of this saga. It's been about 2 weeks since I moved out, and honestly, I feel like a completely different person. First off, living alone is amazing. I forgot what it was like to come home to a clean apartment that stayed clean. No crystals everywhere, no sage burning constantly, no one telling me that my need for organization was blocking my creative flow. I can watch TV without someone explaining how the shows I like are low vibrational. I can eat food I bought without wondering if it'll be there when I get home. The financial relief is incredible too. I'm actually saving money even though my rent is higher. No more surprise charges on my credit card for her essential oils or spiritual courses. Last weekend, I was at a coffee shop near my old neighborhood when I saw Allison with some guy I didn't recognize. They were sitting close together, and she was doing her whole wounded spiritual goddess routine, the same one she'd used on me when we first met. I couldn't hear what she was saying, but I could see her wiping away tears while he looked concerned and protective. She was wearing this flowy white dress that screamed, "I'm too pure for this cruel world," and he was eating it up. Poor bastard had no idea what he was walking into. Later that day, her Instagram was back in full force. Posted a picture of a sunset with some quote about how the universe always provides exactly what you need, exactly when you need it. Then another post about divine timing and how, when you release what no longer serves you, you make space for your true blessings. The comments were full of her wellness friends congratulating her on calling in her soulmate and manifesting true love. No mention of the fact that she'd been sobbing over me literally 2 weeks earlier, begging me not to leave. I found out through mutual friends that her parents cut her off financially after she moved back home. Apparently, her dad gave her an ultimatum: get a real job within 30 days or find somewhere else to live. She lasted exactly 5 days before moving in with the new guy. Her mom reached out to me on Facebook, apologizing for enabling Allison's behavior and saying they should have forced her to grow up years ago. She said they'd been hoping that our relationship would help her mature, but they realized they'd just been pushing their responsibility onto me. It was actually a really nice conversation. Her mom seems like a good person who got manipulated by her daughter's victim mentality. She told me that Allison had been calling them crying, saying I'd stolen 2 years of her life and left her with nothing. When they pointed out that she'd never contributed financially and had actually been supported the entire time, she accused them of taking my side against their own daughter. They're done enabling her, which honestly gives me hope that she'll eventually be forced to grow up. But it'll probably take a few more relationships ending the same way. I'm dating again, and it's amazing how different it feels when someone actually wants to build something with you instead of just taking from you. Had coffee with a woman last week who insisted on paying for her own drink, and it was the sexiest thing I'd experienced in years. Not because of the money, but because it showed she saw me as an equal instead of a resource. Thanks again to everyone who helped me see clearly when I was drowning in gaslighting. You guys are the real ones. Peace out, Reddit. Time to go live my actual life. Edit. For everyone asking if I feel bad for the new guy, honestly, yes. But I also know that trying to warn him would just make me look like the crazy ex and give Allison ammunition to paint me as someone who can't let go. He'll figure it out on his own, just like I did.
The new company truck is yours, my dad smiled, handing it to my brother as an engagement gift. I gave my 2 weeks' notice. 3 months later, they were desperate. After 15 years of building my father's plumbing company into a successful business, I watched him hand the keys to my company truck to my younger brother as an engagement present. That was the moment I knew I'd never be valued, no matter what I did. I'm Alex, 35 years old, and until recently I was the backbone of Wilson Family Plumbing. When most of my friends headed off to college, I stayed behind to help Dad expand the business. I learned everything from the ground up, unclogging stubborn drains, fixing leaky pipes, installing complex systems, dealing with irate customers at 2 a.m. during winter emergencies. I became the business while my father, Earl, gradually stepped back into a management role. Dad started with just a van and a toolbox in his garage. Now we have, or rather they have, 8 trucks and 12 employees. That growth wasn't magic or luck. It was thousands of hours of my sweat, sacrificed weekends, and meticulous attention to building our reputation in the community. Every positive review, every repeat customer, every referral. I had personally ensured their satisfaction. My younger brother Travis joined 5 years ago. At 28, he still acts like a teenager who's forced to work in the family store. He's chronically late, takes extended lunches, and leaves jobs half-finished. The number of customer complaints I've had to smooth over after his visits is staggering. While I'm on call 24/7 for emergencies, Travis forgets his phone on weekends. Somehow, Dad always has an excuse ready. He's still learning the ropes, or not everyone has your natural talent, Alex. The warning signs were always there. When I trained new hires, they'd often get promoted above me. When I implemented a new scheduling system that improved our efficiency by 30%, Travis got the credit at our company meeting because he supported the initiative. When I suggested expanding into commercial contracts, Dad dismissed it as too risky, only to praise Travis's innovative thinking when he suggested the same thing 6 months later. The financial disparities became impossible to ignore. Dad had promised me partnership for years, dangling ownership stakes that never materialized. Meanwhile, I discovered Travis was making $15,000 more annually despite having fewer responsibilities and less experience. I was driving a 2010 truck with 180,000 miles on it, while Dad and Travis cruised around in vehicles less than 3 years old. I told myself that loyalty mattered, that family comes first, that Dad would eventually recognize my contributions. I was wrong on all counts. My truck had been breaking down regularly for months. The transmission was slipping, the suspension was shot, and the cargo area had developed rust holes that let in water during rainstorms, damaging expensive equipment. After a particularly bad breakdown that cost us a major client, Dad finally agreed we needed a new vehicle. That night, as I was assessing the damage to my old truck, Dad came out to the garage with 2 beers in hand. He passed one to me and leaned against the workbench. For a moment, it felt like the old days before Travis joined the company, when Dad and I would troubleshoot problems together. "Remember when I taught you how to change the belt on the old Ford?" he asked, a rare smile softening his weathered face. "You couldn't have been more than 12. I nodded, the memory washing over me. "You let me do the whole job while you supervised, told me I had the steadiest hands you'd ever seen on a kid. Never seen anyone take to plumbing like you did, Alex. Natural talent." He took a long sip of his beer, looking at the truck rather than at me. "This business, it wouldn't be what it is without you." For that brief moment, I felt appreciated, connected to him like I rarely did anymore. He clapped me on the shoulder before heading back inside, leaving me to wonder why these moments of recognition had become so rare. Why couldn't he acknowledge my value when it actually mattered, in business decisions, in pay, in front of Travis? I spent weeks researching options, balancing fuel efficiency with cargo capacity, finding the best deals, preparing all the purchase paperwork. I even arranged financing through our longtime bank. The truck would serve as my mobile office for the next decade, so I wanted to get it right. That Sunday, Dad invited us all for dinner. Travis brought his girlfriend Jessica, recently engaged after dating for just 8 months. Mom prepared a feast, and Dad seemed unusually cheerful. After dessert, he stood up and called for everyone's attention. My heart lifted, thinking he was finally going to acknowledge my hard work or announce the partnership we discussed. Instead, he pulled out a set of keys attached to a silver keychain with the company logo. With the biggest smile I'd seen in years, he handed them to Travis. "To help you start your new life, son. The new company truck is yours. I had them add all the upgrades you wanted. Consider it an engagement present from your mother and me." The silence that followed felt like an eternity. Travis grinned smugly while Jessica clapped her hands in delight. They hadn't even noticed my expression. My mother busied herself clearing plates, avoiding my eyes. I finally managed to speak, my voice tight. Dad, we discussed that truck for the service calls I handle. Travis doesn't even do emergency work. Dad waved dismissively. You can keep using your current truck for a while longer. Travis needs to project a professional image now that he'll be taking over more client relationships. Besides, you know how to keep that old one running. You've always been good with repairs. I watched Travis dangle the keys, not even pretending to be grateful, already talking about how he might customize the paint job. The truck that should have been mine, that I needed for my actual work, was now his latest toy. On the drive home in my rattling, aging truck, something finally broke inside me. It wasn't just about the vehicle. It was about 15 years of being overlooked, undervalued, and taken for granted. It was about realizing that no matter what I contributed, I would always be the reliable workhorse while Travis would be the favored son. That night, I couldn't sleep. I scrolled through job listings, something I'd never seriously considered before. I called Jack, a former colleague who'd left to work for a competitor, asking casual questions about their operation. His response shocked me. Alex, with your skills and client relationships, you could write your own ticket anywhere in the county. Seriously, what's kept you at your dad's place all these years? For the first time, I realized that what I thought was loyalty had actually been enabling my own mistreatment. I'd become so accustomed to being undervalued that I'd forgotten my worth. Jack mentioned their company needed an experienced technician to lead their commercial division, exactly the opportunity I'd been denied at my father's company. I spent the next week meticulously documenting everything I handled. I created detailed instructions for all our systems, client preferences, maintenance schedules, supplier relationships, and emergency protocols. I updated our customer database with notes on every major client. I wasn't going to stoop to their level by sabotaging the business, but I also wasn't going to leave them with any excuse to call me after I left. The following Monday, I arrived at the office early and placed an envelope on my father's desk. He arrived an hour later, casually late as usual. When he opened the envelope, his expression shifted from confusion to disbelief. 2 weeks' notice? Is this some kind of joke, Alex? He asked, leaning back in his chair. I explained my decision calmly, professionally. I mentioned the truck incident only briefly, focusing instead on the repeated broken promises about partnership and my need for professional growth. I had accepted a position with Brighton Plumbing Services. You'll be back in a week, Dad scoffed. They can't possibly match what we offer you here. This is just a tantrum about the truck, isn't it? He didn't even bother to ask what they were paying me. If he had, he might have realized I would be making nearly 40% more, with benefits and a clear path to partnership within 2 years. The news spread quickly through the company. Travis cornered me in the supply room, his face flushed with panic rather than his usual smugness. You can't just leave, he hissed. Who's going to handle the Westside contracts, or the hospital maintenance, or the emergency calls? For a brief moment, his confident facade cracked completely. His voice dropped to a whisper. Dad's been grooming me to take over someday, but I don't know half of what you do. I never bothered to learn the systems. I'm not ready for this. The admission of inadequacy surprised me, but it wasn't my problem anymore. For years, he'd been happy to take credit while I did the work. I'm sure you'll figure it out, I replied. After all, you've got a nice new truck to drive around in. Those 2 weeks were surprisingly liberating. I trained others on as many of my responsibilities as possible. I introduced key clients to their new technicians. I documented everything meticulously in a 3-ring binder that I labeled Essential Operations in bold marker. On my last day, I placed it on my father's desk along with my company phone, credit card, and keys to the building. Dad barely acknowledged my departure. He was still convinced I'd come crawling back within days. Mom called that evening, tearfully asking me to reconsider, saying that family businesses have ups and downs, but we needed to stick together. I gently explained that I had stuck by them for 15 years while being consistently undervalued. This wasn't a hasty decision. It was 15 years overdue. The first month at Brighton was eye-opening. My new boss, Kevin, introduced me as the best plumber in the county to clients and staff alike. My suggestions were not only heard but implemented. When I mentioned a better approach to commercial maintenance scheduling, Kevin asked me to develop it into a company-wide system and gave me resources to make it happen. Then came my first major test. Brighton had been bidding on the Lakeside Corporate Park contract for months without success. When Kevin mentioned they were making one final attempt, I realized I had crucial inside information. Wilson Family Plumbing had serviced their buildings for years, and I knew exactly what issues they'd had and what their priorities were. With that knowledge, I could virtually guarantee Brighton would win the contract. But using that information felt wrong, a betrayal of client confidentiality, even if technically I hadn't signed anything preventing it. I spent a sleepless night weighing my options. Brighton had given me everything my family business wouldn't: respect, fair compensation, opportunity. I wanted to prove my value, but not by compromising my principles. The next morning, I walked into Kevin's office and explained that while I couldn't share specific details about Lakeside Systems, I could help Brighton create a stronger general proposal based on my experience with similar properties. Kevin studied me for a long moment. "You know, most guys would have just used whatever advantage they had," he said finally. "Your integrity is exactly why I hired you, Alex." We won the contract anyway, on the strength of our proposal rather than inside information. That moment cemented my place at Brighton more than any easy victory could have. Most surprisingly, I finished work at reasonable hours. No more midnight calls because Travis had botched a simple job. No more working through weekends because Dad had promised impossible deadlines without consulting me. I began reconnecting with old friends, took up hiking on Saturdays, and even started dating someone who wasn't exhausted from my constant work emergencies. Meanwhile, the fallout at Wilson Family Plumbing was swift and severe. Within 2 weeks, their Yelp rating had dropped from 4.8 to 3.2 stars. Customers who had specifically requested me were furious to learn I'd left. The complex scheduling system I'd created, which no one else fully understood, began to fall apart, resulting in missed appointments and double bookings. The texts started rolling in by the third week. First from Travis: "How do I access the hospital maintenance records?" Then from Dad: "Where did you keep the warranty information for the Peterson job?" I responded with brief, professional directions to the documentation I'd left behind, but nothing more. A major crisis hit when Travis attempted to handle the quarterly maintenance at Riverside Medical Center, our largest commercial client. He forgot to shut off a main valve, causing flooding in a storage area. The hospital immediately terminated their contract, a $180,000 annual loss. That same week, 2 experienced technicians quit, citing the chaotic scheduling and lack of leadership. I later heard from Tom, one of those technicians who'd taken a job at a competitor, about what happened afterward. Travis had suffered a complete meltdown in the office, hurling tools across the workshop and screaming that he was being set up to fail. He'd accused Dad of throwing him into the deep end without proper training, of expecting him to instantly fill my shoes when he'd never been given the chance to learn. Tom described how Travis had finally collapsed onto a bench, head in his hands, muttering, "Alex made it look so easy. I never knew. I never bothered to know." Dad had apparently just stood there, ashen-faced, as the business he'd built crumbled around him. The facade of the Golden Sun was shattering under the weight of actual responsibility. The text from my family changed tone dramatically. "We need to talk" became "please call us" became "the business is in serious trouble." Mom started calling daily, her messages increasingly desperate. Travis's fiancée, Jessica, even reached out, saying he was stressed beyond belief and barely sleeping. I maintained my distance, focusing instead on thriving in my new role. I closed 3 major commercial contracts in my first 2 months, earning a substantial bonus. With my increased salary and rational work hours, I was finally able to save enough for a down payment on a modest house. I also bought myself a new truck, not a company vehicle, but my own, paid for with the fruits of my fairly compensated labor. Word travels fast in our industry. Suppliers who worked with both companies mentioned the decline of Wilson Family Plumbing in casual conversation. "Heard your dad had to lay off 3 more guys," one mentioned while delivering parts. "Shame to see a business that's been around so long struggling like that." I maintained professional dignity, never badmouthing my family despite the temptation. After 3 months of silence between us, my father called on a Tuesday evening. His voice sounded different, older, defeated. "Alex, we need to talk. In person, the business. It's not good." We agreed to meet at a coffee shop halfway between our homes, neutral territory. When Dad and Travis arrived, the physical transformation was shocking. Dad had lost weight, his usually immaculate appearance now disheveled. Travis looked like he hadn't slept in weeks, dark circles under his eyes, his typical swagger entirely absent. They laid out the dire situation. Revenue down 60%, staff reduced to just 4 employees, the bank threatening to call their business loan, 3 trucks already sold to cover expenses. The new truck Travis had been so proud of was gone too, sacrificed to keep the lights on. Dad had even mortgaged his house to inject cash into the failing business. "We made mistakes, Alex," Dad admitted, his voice breaking. "I made mistakes. I took you for granted, and now I'm paying the price." For the first time in my life, I saw my father cry. Travis stared at the table, unable to meet my eyes. Dad pushed a folder across the table. Inside was a partnership agreement giving me 45% ownership, a substantial salary increase, and complete operational control. "Please," he whispered, "help us save what's left." The old Alex would have jumped at this opportunity, eager to finally receive the recognition I'd craved for so long. But that version of me died the day they gave away my truck. Instead, I calmly explained that I wasn't interested in returning. I had found a place where my skills were valued from day one, not after catastrophic failure forced recognition. "I'm not trying to punish you," I explained. "I just finally understand my worth. I spent 15 years trying to earn something that should have been freely given: respect, fair compensation, recognition. I won't go backward." Travis finally spoke, his voice hollow. "I didn't realize how much you were doing until you left. I thought running service calls was easy. I thought—" He paused, swallowing hard. "I thought Dad was playing favorites with you, giving you all the important work. I was wrong." I felt no satisfaction in their suffering. Instead, I offered what help I could. Names of qualified plumbers who might join their restructured business, suggestions for streamlining to survive with a smaller operation, and advice on which clients they should prioritize to rebuild their reputation. "This isn't about revenge," I told them. "I didn't leave to hurt you. I left because I deserved better." 6 months later, Wilson Family Plumbing still exists, but as a shadow of its former self. Dad has stepped back significantly, considering early retirement. Travis has been forced to learn the trade properly, handling service calls himself rather than delegating everything. They operate just 3 trucks now, focusing on residential work after losing most commercial clients. We see each other at family gatherings, awkward at first, but gradually finding a new normal. Mom finally stopped trying to guilt me into returning, especially after seeing my new house and hearing about my promotion to commercial division manager. Even Travis has developed a grudging respect, occasionally texting me technical questions which I answer without resentment. For the first time in my adult life, I don't wake up with a knot in my stomach. I'm no longer the desperately loyal son seeking approval that never came. The heaviest burden I've ever carried wasn't the physical labor of plumbing work. It was the emotional weight of trying to earn love and respect from people who took me for granted. Sometimes walking away isn't about revenge. Sometimes it's the only path to self-respect. The greatest revenge, I've learned, isn't watching others fail after you leave. It's succeeding so completely that your absence becomes the measure of your worth. Last month, Kevin mentioned he's planning to open a second location in the neighboring county and wants me to run it. In time, he says, I could buy him out and make it my own company. I find myself mentally designing the logo, planning the service area, imagining the fleet of trucks, all painted a different color than Wilson blue. Not out of spite, but because I'm finally building something that's truly mine.
"We need your money to come back home," my sister begged after being robbed on their luxury vacation. "Good luck," I hung up. Later, my BIL called and exposed. I'm 32, and I've always been the odd one out in my family. I've spent most of my life trying to be something I'm not just to fit in. It never worked. And now, after all these years of walking on eggshells, I've decided it's time to let go. No more pretending, no more trying to win anyone over. It's just me now, and for the first time in my life, I feel like I'm getting a chance to be myself. But it wasn't always like this. Growing up, I was the shadow, the one who never quite measured up to my sister Kelly. She was always the golden child, the one who could do no wrong in my parents' eyes. Kelly was the perfect daughter, charming, beautiful, and always with a smile on her face. She was the one everyone loved, and I was the one who got by unnoticed. And then there was me. I never had the easy charm Kelly did. I wasn't the one they bragged about to their friends. I wasn't the one they took to the doctor when I had a cold. I was just there, not important enough to be seen, not bad enough to be ignored, always in the background. I had learned early on that my place in the family wasn't to be the favorite. That was until my sister's manipulations started getting worse. I didn't notice at first. It was little things, comments here and there, things that didn't seem too bad on their own. "You never really fit in with us, do you?" she'd say, as if it was just an observation. Or, "Why can't you be more like me?" said with a smile that was anything but kind. Over time, it became clear to me that Kelly wanted more than just attention. She wanted to push me out. It came to a head one afternoon when I walked into the living room to find Kelly sitting on the couch, flanked by our parents. They were all looking at me like they had just made some big decision. I knew something was off. My gut was telling me to brace myself, but I didn't expect what came next. "You don't belong in this family," Kelly said, arms crossed and her face twisted into that smug little grin I'd seen far too many times. Her tone was sickly sweet, but I could tell this was no act of kindness. It was the final blow in a long campaign to get me out. And my parents, my mom sitting there with a mug of tea in her hand, barely even looked up as she said, "She's right." I swear for a second I thought I was going to lose it. My dad didn't even bother looking up from his phone as he muttered, "Yeah, maybe it's better this way." That's when the walls crashed down. It wasn't just Kelly being a brat anymore. It wasn't just my mom being distant. It was them, my own parents, agreeing with Kelly. It was like I was invisible, like my feelings didn't matter. I stood there frozen, staring at them. The words echoed in my head, but I didn't say anything. I didn't fight back. For a moment I wanted to scream, but what would it matter? They were already gone. They had already made their decision. I grabbed my jacket off the back of the chair. No one stopped me, not Kelly, not mom, not dad. I didn't look back as I walked out of the door. I remember standing outside for a minute, just breathing. I wasn't crying, even though a part of me wanted to. The thing is, I wasn't hurt like they thought I'd be. I'd been expecting it for so long. Maybe I was just numb at that point. I stayed at my best friend's place that night. She was the one person who had always had my back, no matter what. We ended up sitting on her couch, drinking cheap wine and laughing about how dramatic my family was. We made jokes about how Kelly must have been crowned queen of the family by now. "You're better off," she said, and I didn't disagree with her. But I couldn't help but feel like there was something more to this, something about how easy they made it seem. No hesitation, no second thoughts, just silence. 8 years, that's how long it's been since I walked out of my parents' house, the door closing quietly behind me just like they wanted. The words my sister Kelly had thrown at me that day, "You don't belong in our family," still echoed in my head sometimes, especially when I was alone. My parents didn't even blink when they agreed with her. It was like I didn't even exist anymore. Since then, I've built a life without them. I have my own apartment, a decent job, and friends who actually care about me. It wasn't easy at first. I had to learn to live without the constant judgment and manipulation, but I did it. I learned to breathe again, but still some days that emptiness gnawed at me. No matter how much I wanted to convince myself I didn't care, part of me always did. But everything changed when I got that call. It was 8 years after I left. I was finally at peace, or so I thought. It started like any other day, quiet, relaxing, just me and a cup of coffee on my couch. Then out of nowhere, my phone buzzed. I glanced at the screen, expecting another spam call, but the name that flashed across the screen made my heart drop. It was Kelly. My first instinct was to ignore it. I didn't need her drama, not after all this time. But for some reason, I didn't. I swiped to answer, already feeling the knot form in my stomach. "Emma," she said, and her voice sounded off, frantic, desperate. "I need you to listen to me." I sat up straight, immediately on alert. "What's going on?" I asked, trying to keep my tone even. "We're in trouble, my family. We're stuck. We were robbed." Her voice wavered, and I could hear the panic building. I couldn't help but let out a dry laugh. "Robbed? Are you serious?" My mind was racing. Kelly and her perfect family, always doing everything right, always on top of everything. The idea that they were in trouble seemed impossible. "Yes," she almost screamed. "I don't know what to do. We were on this luxury vacation. All of us, mom, dad, Mike, the kids, and some guy came in and stole everything. All our money, all our credit cards. We're stuck here." I couldn't help but feel a twinge of disbelief. A luxury vacation, her perfect little family, stuck. This was the last thing I expected to hear. Kelly was always the one in control, always the one who had everyone else wrapped around her finger. The thought of her being in any sort of trouble felt surreal. "Where are you?" I asked, trying to process the situation. "We're in a resort in the Caribbean," she said, her voice shaking. "We've got nothing left, we're completely stranded, I don't know who else to call. Please, Emma, I'm begging you, help us, we need money to get home." I took a deep breath, the air feeling thick with tension. For a moment I just stood there, my mind racing. It was clear that Kelly was in panic mode, but there was something off about it. She'd never been the type to ask for help, and when she did, it was never this desperate. "Hold up," I said, trying to keep my calm. "You said you were robbed, but if I'm understanding this right, you're telling me that some guy just walked into your resort room and took everything you had? That's a pretty big coincidence, don't you think?" There was a long silence on the other end of the line, and I could almost feel her scrambling for words. "I don't know how it happened," she stammered. "I'm not sure who it was quick. We were in our rooms and then everything was gone. I'm telling you, Emma, it's a disaster. You've got to help us." I didn't buy it. Something didn't sit right. "So you're telling me you went on a vacation to a high-end resort and you didn't even notice anything was off until after you were robbed? Come on, Kelly, I'm not stupid." She sighed, her voice shifting from panic to frustration. "I don't need you to question me. I need help, Emma. I'm sorry for everything, but please, this isn't the time to make it worse." I stood there, staring at the phone, weighing my options. This was too easy for her. The way she was spinning the story, the urgency in her voice, it was all too familiar. Kelly had always been good at playing the victim, but something about this felt like a trap. Something was off. I didn't trust her. "How much do you need?" I asked, my voice flat. I wasn't going to let her manipulate me into sending money without thinking this through. "Just enough to get us back home. $2,000 should cover it. Please, I don't know who else to turn to." She sounded almost pleading now, like she was about to break down. $2,000. It wasn't a huge sum, but that wasn't the point. The point was that after all these years of being cast aside, of having my family treat me like I didn't matter, Kelly thought she could call me out of the blue and expect me to drop everything and bail her out. I paused, glancing around my apartment. It was small and I didn't have much, but I had enough to get by, and I wasn't going to be dragged back into her mess, not this time. "No," I said finally, "I'm not sending you anything." She gasped and I could hear her scrambling for words. You can't be serious. Emma, this is your family, we need you." "Funny," I replied, my voice colder than I intended. "I thought I wasn't part of the family anymore. Remember, you told me I didn't belong, so why the hell would I help you now?" There was silence on the other end of the line and I could practically feel the anger bubbling up from Kelly. But I didn't care. After all these years, I was done. "Good luck," I added before hanging up the phone. I couldn't help but feel a strange sense of satisfaction. I'd let myself be manipulated for too long and I wasn't going to be anyone's backup anymore. Not after how they'd treated me, not after everything I'd been through. I had finally drawn a line in the sand, and for the first time in years I felt like I was standing on solid ground. I wasn't going to let Kelly drag me back into her drama. I wasn't going to be the person who always cleaned up her mess. I had enough of that. The guilt, however, didn't come from the fact that I didn't help. It came from the realization that, despite everything, a part of me still cared. Maybe that was why I picked up the phone in the first place. Maybe that was why I let her manipulate me for so long. Family, no matter how toxic, had a way of drawing you back in. But then, on the fourth day, I got another call. This time it was Kelly. It was Mike, her husband. He never called me, ever, so when his name appeared on my phone, I felt a knot form in my stomach. I answered the call, trying to sound casual. "Hey Mike, what's up?" "Emma," his voice was urgent, and for the first time it didn't sound like the calm, collected Mike I knew. "We need to talk." I raised an eyebrow. "What's going on?" "I don't know who else to turn to," he said, his voice tight with tension. "I need your help." I felt my heart skip. Mike, you know I've got nothing to offer right now. I can't help Kelly. You know what happened. It's not about Kelly, Mike said quickly. It's about something else, something I just found out. I need to meet you in person. I hesitated, unsure of what to think. Mike had never reached out to me like this. It felt too serious, too sudden. I was about to decline, to say that I wasn't interested in getting involved in their mess again, but something in his voice stopped me. I hung up and sat in silence for a moment, thinking about everything that had happened. I didn't want to get sucked back into their drama. I really didn't, but Mike wasn't the type to ask for help unless it was serious. So, against my better judgment, I decided to meet him. I figured, if nothing else, I could at least hear him out and then move on with my life. The next day, I showed up at the diner. I spotted Mike right away. He was sitting at a corner booth looking as stressed as I had ever seen him. His usually neat appearance was a bit off and there was a nervous energy about him. When he saw me, he waved me over. I slid into the booth across from him. "Hey Mike," I said, trying to keep things casual though I could feel the tension in the air. He looked up at me, his eyes filled with something I hadn't seen before, panicked. "I don't know who else to turn to," he said, his voice cracking. She's been lying about everything." I froze. "What do you mean, lying about what?" He lowered his voice, glancing around as if to make sure no one was listening. "About the robbery. It wasn't some random attack. She planned it. She set it up." I stared at him, trying to make sense of what he was saying. What? Why would she do that? Mike ran a hand through his hair, looking more disheveled than I had ever seen him. "She's been hiding something from me. She's been draining my bank accounts. I just found out this morning. The robbery wasn't random. She was working with the guy who stole from us. She gave him the money." I was stunned. I couldn't process it. "Wait, are you saying Kelly planned the robbery?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "Yes," Mike said, his eyes wide with disbelief. "And that's not all. She's been doing this for months. I thought everything was fine, but it's all been a lie. She's in debt and she's trying to cover it up. She needed a way to get out of this mess and now she's lying to everyone about it." Mike said, "It's all coming together now, and the police report she filed against you, that was just a way to distract everyone. She figured if you were in trouble, no one would notice what she was really doing." I felt sick to my stomach. I had always known Kelly was manipulative, but this was the next level. "Why are you telling me this?" I asked, feeling a mix of confusion and anger. "You know how she is. She's always had you wrapped around her finger. Why are you coming to me now?" Mike's face softened, his eyes filled with frustration. "Because I don't know what to do anymore. I can't trust her, and I can't go to my parents. They'll just take her side like they always do, but you've always seen through her. I need your help." I stared at him, my heart pounding. For the first time in years, someone in my family had finally acknowledged the truth. I didn't know what to say. I was torn between wanting to help Mike and wanting to walk away from the entire situation. But the truth was, I couldn't just sit back and watch Kelly ruin everything. "All right," I said finally, "I'll help, but only if you're ready to expose her. No more covering for her." Mike nodded, looking relieved. "I'm ready." And just like that, I was back in the middle of their chaos. But this time, it wasn't about fixing Kelly's mess. It was about finally taking control. The way I had let myself be manipulated for so long was over. I wasn't going to let her get away with it anymore. After Mike's revelation about Kelly's involvement in the robbery, I felt like I was walking in a fog. The truth about her betrayal hit me hard, but it also gave me a strange sense of clarity. Kelly had always been manipulative, but this was something different. She'd taken it too far this time. Mike and I spent the next few days piecing together the details. We knew Kelly had been living a life far beyond what her paycheck could afford, and her debts had been piling up, but the planned robbery, it was almost too much to believe. "Why didn't you see this sooner?" I asked Mike one night after he filled me in on the latest details. "How could you not have known?" He looked at me, his eyes filled with regret. "I should have known, but she's good at hiding things, and I was too busy trying to make it work. I didn't want to believe she could do something like this. I was always making excuses for her." I understood. Kelly had that effect on people. She could charm anyone into believing her version of reality, but this time the lies had caught up with her. As the week went on, Mike and I began digging deeper into her finances. We uncovered a string of odd transactions, large sums of money transferred into a mysterious account that Mike didn't recognize. And then we found the name on one of the transfers, Nathan Walker. I didn't know that name at first, but as soon as Mike mentioned it, I recognized the look on his face. "You know who that is, don't you?" I asked, narrowing my eyes. Mike's expression turned dark. "Yeah, I know exactly who he is." Nathan Walker was someone I'd heard about, though I'd never met him. He was a guy Kelly had been spending a lot of time with, even though she was still married to Mike. They'd been seeing each other for months, sneaking around behind Mike's back, and it had never sat right with me, but Mike had been too focused on trying to hold his marriage together to see it. Kelly's cheating had been one of the worst-kept secrets in their marriage, but Mike had never confronted her about it directly. He didn't want to face the possibility that the woman he loved had been lying to him for so long. Now it was all falling into place. Nathan was the guy who had been involved in the robbery. Not just involved, he was the one who had stolen their money. It wasn't some random criminal who had broken into their vacation rental. Nathan had orchestrated it all. He was the one who had been in on the scheme from the start, and Kelly had helped him by giving him access to their finances. Mike and I both felt a sickening realization at the same time. This wasn't just a robbery gone wrong. This was a betrayal orchestrated by Kelly using Nathan as her pawn, and the worst part, Nathan was also her lover. "Are you sure?" I asked, my voice trembling. "Are you sure Nathan is the guy who did it? I mean, could it have been someone else?" Mike nodded, his jaw clenched. "It's him. I tracked the phone numbers and the dates. Kelly's been talking to him for months. He's the one who set it all up, and she helped him. She gave him the information, the timing, the location, the details. It was all planned, and now he's the one who's got their money." I sat back, taking in everything. It felt like the world was spinning. Kelly wasn't just a liar or a manipulator, she was dangerous. She had played everyone, including me, and now she had dragged Mike into it all. We had to do something about this. Mike wasn't going to let it go, not when he realized how deep Kelly's betrayal ran, but first, we needed proof. Over the next few days, we gathered everything we could. Mike hired a private investigator to track Nathan and figure out where he was. Meanwhile, I worked with Mike to figure out how we were going to confront Kelly. It wasn't just about saving face anymore, it was about stopping her from destroying everything. Then, it happened, we got the call. "It's time," Mike said one afternoon, his voice tight with resolve. "We've got enough. I know where Nathan is and I know he's got the cash. We're going to confront Kelly. We're going to confront both of them." We met at Mike's house. His parents had already been told about the situation and they agreed to come over, though it was clear they were torn. They loved Kelly even now, but they were finally seeing the truth. When I walked into the living room, Kelly was already there. She stood with her arms crossed, her face twisted in anger as soon as she saw me. Mike's parents were sitting on the couch, their eyes wide with disbelief. "You're unbelievable," Kelly spat at me, her voice dripping with venom. "What do you think you're doing here? This is my family. You've got no right to interfere." I didn't back down. "Funny," I said, my voice steady. "You're the one who's been lying to all of us. You're the one who's been dragging us all through your mess." She took a step forward, but Mike stepped between us. "Enough, Kelly," he said, his voice low. "We know everything about Nathan, about the money, about the lies." Her face was drained of color. "What?" she whispered, panic rising in her voice. "What do you mean?" Mike tossed a stack of papers onto the coffee table. There were screenshots of her bank transactions, messages between her and Nathan, and a copy of the police report she had filed against me. It was all there, laid out in front of her. Kelly's face twisted with rage, and for a moment I thought she was going to scream. Instead, she stood there silent as the reality of what had just been exposed sank in. Her eyes flicked from Mike to me and then back to her parents. "Don't," she said weakly, her voice breaking. "I didn't mean for it to go this far." But it had, and there was no taking it back. Mike's parents stood up, shaking their heads. For the first time, I saw them walk away from her. They left without another word. It was over. In that moment, as Kelly stood there, stunned and defeated, I finally realized that I wasn't the only one who had been manipulated. She had done this to herself. She had crossed every line, and now she had no one left to blame. The days after the confrontation were a blur of emotions: relief, anger, exhaustion. Everything had been laid out in front of Kelly, in front of my parents. There was no more hiding, no more pretending. The truth had finally come to light. Kelly, standing there with nothing left to defend herself, had no choice but to watch as everything she had built up, her lies, her manipulations, her little world of control, crumbled around her. For the first time in my life, I felt something I hadn't felt in years: peace. It wasn't just the relief of knowing that Kelly's games were finally over. It was the peace of knowing that I had done the right thing for once. I hadn't walked away from the mess. I had faced it head-on, confronted the truth, and in the end, freed myself from the family I'd been trying to fit into for so long. But the road to this peace wasn't as smooth as it seemed. The aftershocks of the confrontation lingered, especially when it came to my parents. They couldn't ignore the truth, but they tried. They tried to paint Kelly as a victim, saying she'd been under stress, that maybe she'd lost control, that it was all a mistake. But I saw through their excuses. They didn't want to admit that the golden child had finally crossed the line. They didn't want to face the reality that they had failed me in ways they couldn't take back. The week after the confrontation was difficult. I hadn't spoken to Kelly since that day, and I didn't plan to. She tried calling, leaving messages, but I ignored them. There was nothing left to say to her, nothing I needed to hear. I didn't need to be the person my family wanted me to be. I just needed to be me, and that was enough.
I couldn't watch your kid, my mom refused. You're on your own now, I texted while canceling every payment. On Christmas Day, my dad came. I'm 31. I knew things were bad the moment I saw her expression. My mother, Margaret, was sitting on the couch with Lisa's kids, looking healthier than I'd seen her in months. For a woman who was supposedly too frail to watch my daughter Mia for a single night, she seemed to be doing just fine with my sister's 3 children. My stomach dropped. Everything froze. The laughter died when they spotted me in the doorway. My mother's face paled for a split second before she recovered, pasting on that smile I'd seen 1,000 times before. Jake, what a surprise. I wasn't expecting you, she chirped, bouncing my nephew on her knee. I couldn't speak. The envelope of cash in my hand, the extra money for utilities I'd brought over, suddenly felt like a lead weight. My eyes darted between my mother, Lisa's kids, and my dad, who slumped deeper into his recliner, avoiding my gaze. You said you couldn't watch Mia because of your health, I finally managed, my voice tight. The room went silent. My mother hesitated, but Lisa, always ready with an excuse, jumped to her defense. Too much on her plate, she said, wouldn't want her to overdo it. My blood pressure spiked. A familiar pressure built behind my eyes. I repeated her words back to her, keeping my voice low. She was literally babysitting right now. My mother sighed, rubbing her temple like I was causing her stress. The irony wasn't lost on me. She explained that it was different, that Lisa needed her help. Raising kids alone isn't easy. The floor disappeared beneath me. 32 years of being second best crystallized in that single moment. I asked her point-blank if Lisa, who had never paid a single bill in her life, who Mom had bent over backward for since we were kids, needed her more than I did. Silence crashed down around us. My father shifted uncomfortably. Lisa rolled her eyes. And my mother, she just shook her head as if I was being ridiculous. Not like that, she insisted, but it was exactly like that. My jaw clenched tight enough to crack teeth. Everything suddenly made sense. My mother's supposed illness wasn't about health, it was about control. She didn't want to risk me cutting off the money flow. So she lied. She manipulated me. She let me believe she was too weak to help, all while cashing my checks without guilt. And Lisa knew. She had always known. Something inside me snapped. Years of frustration, resentment, and disappointment boiled over. I told them I finally understood. I was never part of this family, not really. Just the backup plan, the safety net. The idiot who kept the lights on while they all lived their lives. My mother gasped dramatically. I cut her off before she could speak. This wasn't fair? No, what wasn't fair was me paying their bills for years while they treated me like an afterthought, believing they actually needed my help when the truth was they just didn't want to do anything for me. My mother was a liar. Lisa leaned forward with that smirk I'd grown to hate. She called me dramatic, claimed Mom had to tiptoe around me because I was uptight. I turned to her, my expression carved from stone. I called her pathetic. She let Mom coddle her like she was still 15, and she ate it up because it was easier than taking responsibility for her own life. They deserved each other. Without another word, I turned and walked out. My mother called after me. Lisa yelled something snarky. My father remained silent. As always, I didn't stop. I couldn't. My hands trembled on the steering wheel. My throat burned. The drive home passed in a blur of streetlights and traffic signals. By the time I pulled into my driveway, I knew what I had to do. Erin was waiting for me in the kitchen, Mia already asleep upstairs. One look at my face was all it took. She asked me what happened, her voice soft with concern. I told her everything. The babysitting, the lies, the final confirmation of what we'd both suspected for years. She didn't seem surprised. Maybe part of her had always known too. She asked me what I planned to do next. I told her I was done, just done. That night I slept better than I had in years. The next morning I canceled every payment. The rent, the utilities, the car insurance, the grocery deliveries, everything. Then I sent one final text. "You're on your own now, good luck," and I blocked their numbers. What followed was pure chaos. First came the missed calls, dozens of them lighting up my phone like a Christmas tree before I blocked their numbers. Then the emails, urgent, desperate, guilt-laden. When those went unanswered, they started calling Erin. She declined each call with a satisfaction that made me fall in love with her all over again. Finally, Margaret took it public. A long, tearful Facebook post about how her ungrateful son abandoned his poor, sick mother in her time of need. She described in vivid detail how she'd sacrificed everything for me, only to be repaid with cruelty. I didn't take the bait. Instead, I wrote my own post without dramatics, just cold, hard truth. I'd been paying their bills for years. My mother lied about being sick to avoid babysitting my daughter. She refused to watch my child for one night, but was perfectly fine watching my sister's kids. I was done being used. The reaction was immediate and brutal. Family members I hadn't spoken to in years reached out in support. Friends shared their own stories of toxic family dynamics. Even some of my parents' neighbors chimed in, mentioning how they'd seen my mother gardening or shopping on days she'd claimed to be bedridden. Lisa got the worst of it. Her carefully crafted image as the struggling single mom crumbled under the weight of questions about her spending habits and constant vacations. Then came the final act, a knock at my door 3 days later. Through the peephole, I saw them. Margaret and Frank standing on my porch looking desperate. My father's face was haggard. My mother's eyes were red-rimmed, though I wondered if the tears were genuine or just another performance. I hesitated, my hand on the doorknob. Part of me wanted to ignore them, to let them stand there until they gave up and left. But another part, the part that still hadn't completely let go, wanted to hear what they had to say. I opened the door but remained in the doorway, blocking their entrance. My mother began immediately. Her voice broke as she pleaded for us to talk, reminding me they were my parents. I told them to talk, not moving from my position. My father cleared his throat. "Son, your mother is devastated. We both are. We never meant to hurt you." "You didn't mean for me to find out," I corrected him. "There's a difference." My mother reached for my arm, but I stepped back. "Sweetheart, I know you're upset, but cutting us off like this, it's cruel. We can't make our rent this month. The electric company is threatening to shut off our power. Is that what you want? Your parents living in the dark?" The guilt trip was so predictable, so transparent that I almost laughed. "You have options," I said calmly. "Dad can get a job, you can downsize to a smaller place. Lisa can finally start contributing, or you can keep playing these games and see where that gets you." My mother's expression hardened. "After everything we've done for you, this is how you repay us, by throwing us out on the street. What exactly have you done for me, Mom? Name one thing from the past decade that wasn't about what I could do for you." Silence. My father looked away. My mother's mouth opened and closed, but no words came out. That was what I thought. I told them. They had made their choice. Now they could live with it. I shut the door. For the first time in my life, I was truly free. No more guilt, no more manipulation, no more chasing love that was never really there, and it felt damn good. The next few weeks were surprisingly peaceful. Aaron and I took Mia to the beach for a long weekend. We started looking at houses in a different school district, something we'd talked about for years but never pursued. I got promoted at work, partly because I could finally focus without constant family emergencies distracting me. But of course, life is never that simple. The gossip reached me through well-meaning coworkers and distant relatives. My parents were spreading rumors that I'd had some kind of mental breakdown. Lisa was telling anyone who would listen that I'd always been unstable and money-obsessed. My aunt called me one evening. She skipped the pleasantries, telling me immediately that they were saying I'd lost it. Margaret was telling everyone I was having some kind of midlife crisis. I sighed, leaning back in my office chair. I asked her if she was surprised. Not even a little, she admitted. She knew my mother. She couldn't stand losing control. My aunt had always seen through my mother's manipulations. It was why they barely spoke anymore. I asked her how bad it was. Bad enough, she told me. They were apparently being evicted next month. Frank tried to get his old job back at the hardware store, but they weren't hearing. Lisa had been asking everyone for loans, but people were starting to connect the dots. A twinge of something, not quite guilt but close, passed through me. I told her it wasn't my problem anymore, but my voice lacked conviction. My aunt was quiet for a moment. She agreed it wasn't and acknowledged I'd done more than enough. She just thought I should know what was being said. After we hung up, I sat in silence, watching the sunset through my office window. Was I a bad son? A cruel person? The doubts crept in like shadows. Erin found me there an hour later, still staring into the distance. She asked if I was okay, perching on the edge of my desk. I admitted I didn't know. Part of me felt free, but another part felt guilty. She took my hand, her expression serious. She reminded me that I'd supported them for years. I'd given them more chances than they deserved. All they had to do was be honest with me, treat me with the same respect they gave Lisa. They couldn't even do that. She was right. I knew she was right. I confessed my worry about what would happen when they really needed help, when they were elderly and genuinely couldn't take care of themselves. Erin squeezed my hand. That was a bridge to cross when we got there, she told me. But supporting them didn't have to mean being manipulated by them. There was a difference between helping parents and being their personal ATM. I nodded, pulling her into my lap. I asked her when she got so wise. She claimed she'd always been wise. I was just finally listening. 2 months passed. Mia learned to count to 20, a development that brought me more joy than any promotion ever could. We put an offer on a house in a quiet neighborhood with good schools. Life moved forward. Then came the Christmas card. It arrived on a Tuesday, nestled between bills and grocery store flyers. No return address, but I recognized my mother's handwriting immediately. Inside was a generic holiday card with a family photo. My parents and Lisa with her kids, everyone smiling as if nothing had changed. On the back, a single line in my mother's looping script. "We miss you," no apology, no acknowledgement of what had happened, just 3 words that were supposed to make everything better. I tossed it in the trash without a second thought. That evening, as Erin and I decorated our Christmas tree, the doorbell rang. I froze, tinsel in hand. Erin offered to get it, squeezing my shoulder as she passed. I heard murmured voices, then Erin returned with an expression I couldn't quite read. "It was your dad," she told me quietly, "just him." My father stood in the entryway, hands in his pockets, looking smaller than I remembered. His hair had gone completely gray since I'd last seen him. Deep lines etched his face. We exchanged terse greetings. I asked him what he was doing here. He glanced at Erin, then back to me. He asked if we could talk just for a few minutes. Erin gave me a look that said it was my call. I nodded, and she took Mia upstairs for her bath, leaving us alone. I gestured toward the living room, and we sat on opposite ends of the couch, the partially decorated Christmas tree blinking between us. "Your mother doesn't know I'm here," he began, staring at his hands. "She'd be furious if she found out. That got my attention. So why are you?" He took a deep breath. "Because I owe you an apology, a real one, not whatever manipulative nonsense your mother's been trying." I didn't respond. I'd heard too many hollow apologies over the years. He continued, his voice rough. He had failed me not just recently, but my whole life. He stood by while my mother favored Lisa. He watched her take advantage of my generosity without saying a word. He let it happen. The raw honesty in his voice caught me off guard. I asked him why he never stepped in. He rubbed his face, suddenly looking every bit his 68 years. He confessed he was a coward. It was easier to let her have her way than to fight about it. Easier to stay quiet than stand up for what was right. He didn't expect forgiveness. He wouldn't in my shoes. But he needed me to know that I was right to walk away. And he was proud of me for having the courage he never did. Something tight in my chest loosened slightly. I asked him what would happen now. They were moving in with Lisa, he told me with a grimace. My mother's idea, not his. The irony was, Lisa wasn't happy about it either. Turns out she didn't actually want to take care of them. Who'd have thought? Despite everything, I felt a small smile tug at my lips. Shocking, I deadpanned. For the first time in months, my father smiled too, a sad, tired smile, but genuine. He said he should go. My mother would be wondering where he was. I walked him to the door, uncertain what to say. He paused on the threshold, turning back. "Merry Christmas, son. That's a beautiful little girl you've got. You're a better father than I ever was." Before I could respond, he was gone, trudging through the light snow back to his car. I closed the door, leaning against it, oddly shaken. I hadn't expected him to acknowledge his failures, let alone apologize for them. It didn't erase the past, but it was something. Erin found me still standing there minutes later. She asked if I was okay. "Yeah," I said, surprising myself by meaning it. "I think I am." That night, as we finished decorating the tree, I thought about family, not the one I was born into, but the one I'd chosen. Erin, who loved me without conditions. Mia, who looked at me like I hung the moon. Even my friends and coworkers who'd stood by me through everything. They were my real family, not perfect, but real. We moved into our new house, a modest 4-bedroom with a backyard big enough for a swing set. Mia turned 3, celebrating with a dinosaur-themed party that left our kitchen covered in green frosting for days. I heard from my father occasionally, brief, awkward phone calls that neither of us quite knew how to navigate. My mother still refused to apologize, telling anyone who would listen that I was the one who needed to make amends. Lisa had apparently kicked them out after 2 months, unable to handle their constant demands. They were now renting a small apartment on a fixed income. Part of me felt vindicated. They were finally facing the consequences of their actions. But another part felt sad, not for them exactly, but for what could have been. For the relationships we might have had if things had been different. One sunny Saturday, as I pushed Mia on her new swing set, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "It's Lisa. Can we talk?" I stared at the screen, unsure how to respond. My sister and I hadn't spoken since that day at our parents' house. What could she possibly have to say now? Curiosity won out. "When and where?" I replied. We met at a coffee shop the following Monday during my lunch break. Lisa was already there when I arrived, looking different than I remembered. Less polished, more real. She thanked me for coming. I asked her directly what she wanted. She wrapped her hands around her coffee mug, avoiding my eyes. She owed me an apology, she finally admitted. She'd been awful to me. I raised an eyebrow, waiting. She explained how she thought it would be fine when our parents moved in with her. She figured they'd help with the kids, maybe pitch in with bills, but they just expected everything. Mom complained about her cooking, her parenting, her housekeeping. Dad sat around watching TV all day. "Sounds familiar," I remarked dryly. She nodded, looking chagrined. For the first time, she understood what I'd been dealing with. It was exhausting. After 2 months, she couldn't take it anymore. I noted that she'd kicked them out. She had to, she insisted. They were driving her crazy. I leaned back, studying my sister's face. There was something different in her expression, a humility I'd never seen before. I asked her why she was telling me this. She sighed, meeting my eyes properly. She admitted I was right about everything. Mom did favor her. She did take advantage. She let me carry the burden alone because it was easier than admitting how messed up everything was, and she was sorry, truly. I wasn't sure what I'd expected from this meeting, but it wasn't this. Lisa had never apologized to me, not once in 32 years. I told her I appreciated that, but one apology didn't erase decades of behavior. She quickly agreed. She wasn't asking for forgiveness. She just needed me to know that she saw it now, what they did to me, what she did. She was trying to be better for her kids. Something in her words struck a chord. For my kids. Despite everything, Lisa was a mother trying to break the cycle. I asked if she was still in touch with them. Sometimes, she said. Mom was still mom, she'd never change, but Lisa was setting boundaries now. No more endless babysitting, no more loans, no more guilt trips. I nodded, understanding exactly what she meant. I asked about her kids, surprising myself with the question. Lisa smiled, some of her tension visibly easing. They were good, she told me, busy. Jack had started kindergarten. Emma was obsessed with soccer. They sometimes asked about their cousin, Mia. An awkward silence fell between us. 32 years of complicated history couldn't be resolved in a single coffee meeting. I finally told her that I couldn't promise we'd ever be close. There was too much water under that bridge, but maybe we could start over, as adults, without all the baggage. Lisa nodded, eyes suspiciously bright. She'd like that, she said softly. We talked for another 20 minutes, careful, neutral topics. Her job, my new house, the weather. It wasn't much, but it was a beginning. As we were leaving, she turned to me. She thanked me again for meeting her, and for standing up to them. If I hadn't, she wasn't sure she ever would have seen the truth. I nodded, not quite ready to say, "You're welcome," but acknowledging her words. Walking back to my office, I felt lighter somehow. Not because everything was fixed, it wasn't, and might never be, but because I'd finally broken free of the patterns that had defined my life for so long. I wasn't the family ATM anymore. I wasn't the forgotten son, the reliable one who never got the recognition he deserved. I was just Jake, husband, father, and man, finally living on his own terms. That night, as I tucked Mia into bed, she looked up at me with her mother's eyes. "Daddy," she said sleepily, "are you happy?" I kissed her forehead, breathing in the sweet scent of her shampoo. "Yes, sweetheart," I said. "I'm very happy, and for the first time in as long as I could remember, it was completely true."